imagine you just started this friendship or relationship and everything's going pretty well. You're getting to know each other, what, each other's likes, dislikes are, their character, all of that. And then all of a sudden, maybe like a few months go into, building this friendship or relationship, and you guys start having tension. There's conflict, there's maybe negative talk. And your initial reaction is to run because you don't like uncomfortable situations. Like, you don't like conflict. You don't want to bring up your feelings. You just don't like any of that. And so you start to harbor resentment. You start to get defensive. The other person gets defensive. There's maybe negative talk going on. There's all of these things that then causes your relationship or friendship, whatever this is, to fail. And if you never push through those uncomfortable moments, then you could be preventing growth from happening. You keep short circuiting that because you just don't like these uncomfortable situations. You just want to keep running. And so this is what I want to talk about today, the 3 communication habits that just kill relationships. And when I'm talking about relationships in this sense, I'm just meaning like friendships, any relationships under that, broad umbrella term. Um, yeah, but this is something that over the years I've noticed that I've really really developed my communication skills, and the only way I've been able to do that is by placing myself in uncomfortable situations. So, with that being said, my name is Adriana, host of the Creating a Life You Love podcast. And the 3 communication habits that we'll talk about today that really just destroy your relationships, I want to talk about what they are, and then what to do instead. So, we have defensiveness, we have gossip, and then passive aggressiveness. And these 3, I would say, have been very prominent in my life just in recent times since I have started my walk with God. They've been kind of made aware in my life. I think in the world, in our culture, these things can be very normalized. And what we don't realize is, even though everyone does them, they're not necessarily good because it's going to cause a lot of pain, a lot of conflict, and it's going to never allow you to have a full, deep, meaningful connection with someone, whether that's a spouse, boyfriend, girlfriend, friend, even people in your day to day life that's just going to harbor resentment, tension, all the above. Now, the first one I wanted to touch on is defensiveness. And the first thing that I think is kind of good to realize is understand where you get a certain habit. So when I look back at my life when I was younger, I constantly felt bad for doing things. I was very clumsy as a child. I'd constantly spill things, still kind of do that now, but I wasn't the neatest always. And I just remember feeling like very bad for that, feeling very bad for like kind of my presence. And so what started to happen was anytime someone would bring something up, I would start to get defensive and be like, oh, well, it wasn't my fault. I did this because I was trying to self-protect myself from feeling the pain that I once felt as a child. So with that being said, with all of these different with all of these different communication habits, I would suggest looking where they started in your life first, like seeing where they first originated from, and then that can probably give you a better idea. It can also have you facilitate more grace for yourself because a lot of times we can look at these things and be like, oh my gosh, like how can I possibly do this? Like I'm such a bad person, whatever it may be. If you have, negative self-talk, without realizing that all of these habits were conditioned by something when you were younger or even in recent times, but they're always like the root to why you behave this way. So I'd really say that I started noticing defensiveness in my life when I got into a relationship. So I think that's really, you really notice that. So my boyfriend, anytime he would like bring up something that perhaps maybe I didn't react in the best way when I said something to my parents or to someone, and maybe he was just nudging me to be like, hey, maybe, this person didn't take that the right way. I would get so defensive. And this caused a lot of issues in our relationship because I felt like it was an attack on my character. it was like I was trying to protect my pride, really protect my ego. I would get very defensive, even if it was like down to the way, something I was doing could have been more efficient if I was doing it another way. And he was just trying to help me out. I would get very defensive because I felt like it was an attack on my character. Even like recording my podcast episodes, showing my podcast episodes to him, and then me asking, "Oh, do you have any suggestions?" Then him giving me suggestions and then me being defensive. Like, it was to the point where it was just creating a lot of tension. And so eventually we both just kind of like broke down in that. There was a certain time where I was like very just upset and just felt like we weren't on the same team. So it was causing a lot of tension, as you can imagine. Um, and that was a point where I realized, like, wow, I have to get this defensiveness under control. And at first, I really tried to like muster my way through that. I tried to like just hold in my like anger and like, if someone was trying to correct me or say something, um, but I realized that didn't work because then I was just harboring resentment and then passive aggressiveness, which we'll get into later. So I don't recommend holding it down, trying to like muster the strength to not be defensive. Instead, what I found has helped in my own Christian walk is bringing it to the Lord. So anytime I'm feeling defensive, anytime someone brings up a, suggestion, right? Say I'm talking on the phone with a patient and my boss has a correction for me, right, on something that I said. Instead of me saying, "Oh, well, I didn't remember that. This patient kind of cut me off here," and trying to like make up excuses to protect myself and my ego and my character, I'm gonna pause and I'm gonna really try to just listen to the other person. Now, while I'm pausing, I'm asking the Lord for strength so that I don't blow up and get upset. I'm asking the Lord for strength and I'm saying, "Okay, Lord, please just help me to see things through this person's perspective. Is this correction or suggestion that they are saying something that could be useful to me?" And so I'm trying to listen. I'm trying to hear their um, thoughts, and I'm not making assumptions. It's really easy if someone has a suggestion for you to automatically assume that, oh, I'm doing everything wrong. They hate what I'm doing. They want to fire me, or they want to break up with me because I'm doing this one thing wrong. And then your mind is just going to spiral and you're going to get even more defensive. So what you want to do is don't make assumptions, try to see where they're coming from. And then from there, be slow to speak, quick to listen. Wait for people to speak without interrupting them, genuinely listen to what they're saying, and then ask questions. So, for instance, maybe your friend comes to you and says, "Hey, I really felt hurt by the way you talked to me earlier. You had like a tone in your voice. I just wanted to know what was up." And you start getting defensive, right? We're not going to do that anymore, though. We're going to pause and then we're going to ask questions. We're going to say, "Oh, okay. I didn't realize I did that. If you didn't realize, how is a way that I could go about that differently next time? I think I was just frustrated in the moment, but like, what would you want to hear me say? In what tone, in what way?" Or even just asking questions like, "How did that make you feel?" Or if someone has a suggestion for you, saying, "Okay, so I see that you are suggesting that I do things differently. How can I put this into practice? How can I put this into practice in the best way going forward?" And so just like asking questions to see what they mean instead of making assumptions. And so obviously there can be such a thing as unjust criticism. Someone could be saying something that's completely false or they perceived something completely differently, but it's not going to do you any good to be defensive in that situation as well. I wanted to just bring up a few scripture references in this. One is Proverbs 12:1. And that says, "Whoever loves discipline loves knowledge, and he who hates reproof is stupid." So, this basically saying the wise person accepts correction and consequently grows wiser, but the one who cannot accept criticism goes nowhere. So, just take that verse like into your life whenever you start feeling defensive, whenever you start feeling this like anger boiling up inside of you. Just remember, like, the way that you're going to grow in life is by accepting correction, filtering it through a lens of, is this something that is true? Like, could I see this being true? Maybe this person was completely exaggerating something that you did, and maybe all it takes is you clarifying what your intentions actually were in that. But whatever it may be, even if it is something that's unjust, do not seek revenge. Um, if something is unjust, you can make your case in a wise and a calm way. And maybe you even need to take some time. And sometimes, if it's like a bigger thing of like, oh, something that I did here was like really wrong, or something that, you did here was really wrong, I think taking time to, like, process that before even saying anything may be good as well. So say your friend brings up something that, you did to her. Maybe you were angry that day, you were frustrated. Going back to the example earlier, you were kind of like had a tone, you're very upset, and maybe you're still in the heat of the moment and they decide to bring it up then. Not ideal, not smart on their behalf, right? To bring it up when you're still in the heat of the moment. So then just calmly saying, "Hey, can we talk about this later when I like calm down a little bit more? But I hear what you're saying. Let's just talk about this later because I just don't have the capacity to talk about this now." So like even saying that, but all in all, I've just found in my life this defensiveness character has truly gone away when I've like prayed specifically over that. Um I will definitely do an episode on prayer, just trying to like make sure I have all my bases covered on that, and give you like the best information possible that I know that I've used and put into practice and experienced. But with that being said, praying for this defensiveness spirit to go away has been so amazing. And I actually have a story for this. I'm kind of spending a lot of time on this defensiveness bit, but a few months ago, this was like January maybe, my boyfriend and I were talking about fasting as a spiritual discipline. And I was like very just denial. Denial was like the word of the day. I did not want to accept the fact that fasting can be in any way, shape, and form good for your spiritual life. I just didn't get that. I didn't understand. I said maybe for some people, but not for me. And so I was very defensive, very just denying anything that he had to say, and didn't want to hear even his experience with it, because I just didn't want to go without food. Like I just didn't understand. I'm like, I don't want to go without food. I feel like that's not good. That just made me upset, and I don't know why specifically. But I was just getting very riled up. And so I was denying it, denying it, denying it. A few days later, my friend had a vision about me. And I had shared this a few episodes back, but basically the vision was me stuck in this like cage. And basically how I got out of this cage was I had this key that I had to use, and I had to turn the key 3 times, and I had to escape out of this cage by turning the key 3 times. Then I was in green pastures, running around, everything was great. I was really going through a difficult time mentally. This might have been February actually, but yeah, I was going through a very difficult time mentally, just like a lot of fears. And everything was like going great in my life, but it was just mentally struggling. And so, what do you know? My friend texts me, she tells me about this vision, and then I'm thinking about it. And that night, when she told me that vision, my boyfriend and I again talked about fasting. And I feel like the Lord, the Holy Spirit, just like nudged me and said, like, fast for 3 days. And of course, me being in complete denial about that, I'm like, no, I do not want to do that. Being defensive, just didn't want to do that at all. And my friend the next morning, who sent that vision to me in an audio message that day, she texts me and she's like, "Yeah, so I feel like the key turning 3 times has something to do with you fasting, maybe for 3 days." And so it's just crazy that the night before, I literally thought that. I tried to brush it off, I tried to deny it. And then my friend told me that. So I did eventually fast for 3 days. Some really cool things happened from that. I talked about that in another episode a few months back. But overall, if I would have remained defensive, if I would have remained in denial, I wouldn't have experienced the fruit that fasting had to offer. And so that's just like a little story of something that could have prevented my growth. Defensiveness could have prevented my growth. Denial could have prevented it. But I just had to let my ego down, let my pride go, and realize that sometimes people really just want to help you. They really just want to offer something that could literally change your life. And by you denying it, it's not going to help any. But moving on from defensiveness, I wanted to talk about gossip. Now, it says in Ephesians 4:29, do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouth, but only what is helpful for building up others according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. And so Jesus taught that all of the words we speak, good and bad, flow from the abundance of good or evil that's stored in our heart. And it talks about that in Matthew 12:33. So if you are constantly talking bad about this one person, constantly maybe just jealous of her, so that's why you're talking bad, that is just a sign of what is stored in your heart. I've found many times that gossiping was usually the majority of the time me comparing myself to others by trying to maybe elevate, I was trying to maybe elevate myself so I would feel better about myself and putting this other person down. Or maybe I just really wanted something they had. And so that's why I was talking bad about them. I remember when I was maybe a few years ago, I had I had a few friends that I really loved spending time with. And there was this one girl that would also spend time with us. I often found that she would spend more time with them. So I was jealous of that. I didn't like that. I wanted to be the friend that always spent time with these girls, and I wasn't. And so I kind of started to talk bad about this one girl. It wasn't necessarily that I was jealous of her, but more jealous of like I wanted to spend time with these friends. And so if I would have just communicated that to my friends, that would have been a lot better. But instead, I was causing drama and gossiping and just not talking about great things here. So this episode should really just be called Exposing Myself because I am. But this is all to just be honest and like try to explain that this is all a journey. This defensiveness in my life. I recently, when I'm preparing this episode, I asked my boyfriend, I'm like, have I been like defensive lately? And he's like, no, you really haven't. And that was like so cool to hear because that's something that I had prayed for, that I had prayed for, that I had prayed for, and then like goes away. And I'm not saying that it'll never happen, but like my boyfriend said, he hasn't noticed it. So that's just been really cool. But same with the gossiping part. It did take time for me to stop like talking about other people. And maybe it wasn't even with bad intentions, but gossiping can oftentimes just be something to talk about with friends. Maybe you don't know this one girl very much, but you do know this other person mutually. So you start talking about her life and maybe her relationship and like all these things that maybe if she heard, she wouldn't feel very good about that you were, talking about her. And so, some bad things about gossiping. Number one, you're only seeing things from one perspective. Like, you're not taking the other person into account. It's also going to make the people that you're gossiping with view you as very untrustworthy because if you're gossiping about someone else, they're going to think that you're also gossiping about them? And I think gossiping in today's society is just so like normalized. I saw this Instagram post the other day. It was basically just a trend of like where the girls who want to go out, eat, dinner and gossip. Um, and the comment section was like a range of people saying like, yes, but like not the gossiping part, or people saying, I know gossip is bad, but like I don't care, I love it. And so I don't think people realize that like it truly is addicting and it just gives you like just bad energy. Like nothing about it is good. And so I've noticed from my life what gossiping does is it makes me more bitter, more resentful, just more angry with my life because I'm just talking about someone else. And so maybe you're around your friends and they're starting to talk badly about someone. What I would say is, well, we don't know what's going on in their lives. We're only seeing things from our perspective. Maybe something's really like going on in her life that's making her act this way. Like I hear that she did this thing to you that's, obviously not cool, but I don't think we should talk badly about her without knowing like the full story and the full picture. Um, and so I think that's something to just like kind of reframe the conversation. You can shift the conversation. If you're really close with this friend group, I would say to actually bring it up as, hey guys, I don't think it's good that we're gossiping. This is a problem. If they are strong Christians, they know that gossiping is bad. So that's just kind of a gentle reminder of like, hey guys, I think we kind of got off track, but like we shouldn't be gossiping about, so and so. Um, and just reminding them of like, out of the heart, the mouth speaks. So, like, what is in your heart? Do you have bitterness? Do you have resentment, unforgiveness for this person? If you have any of that, bring it to them. Don't just start bringing it up to other people. And so maybe you're now wondering, okay, well, like, what if I need to talk to my friend about a situation where someone did me wrong and I need to ask them, like, how the heck to respond to it? And so this is something that, um, I've experienced with my friends, and my boyfriend. We've had times where we've needed to, like, seek godly advice for a situation, and so this is just something that you wanna be careful of when you're talking to a friend about a situation that you need advice on, not talking negatively about the person that you need advice on. Instead, just bringing the facts. If you have unforgiveness and resentment and bitterness towards your heart, you could be kind of passive aggressive, and want to actually go into that in this next one. But something I wanted to talk about before going into passive aggressiveness was having a strong community to where you can hold each other accountable for these communication habits, where you can ask your friends to point out your blind spots so you can prayerfully bring these things to the Lord. And this also sets like a vulnerability and transparency to your friend group, that will be able to sharpen one another. So something that my boyfriend did was he like texted his friends, texted me, and asked like if there's anything that he could do better, like in his communication habits, in his friendship or relationship with, that person. And if someone does ask you that, I would prayerfully consider it before just saying a whole text message of like, you did this, you did this. And if you ask someone that, ask them to prayerfully consider what blind spots could be in your life or something that you're missing, before bringing it up to you, because you also don't want to just be hit with a bunch of things of like, you're doing this. Like, they should be kind and nice, in explaining the things that you could be doing better. And also, if you do ask a friend or anyone that, be prepared to receive something that you may not want to hear, but that you need to hear for growth. But honestly, I just think that's like very, like, just sets the stage for your friend group. Going into passive aggressiveness, this is something that I've definitely dealt with, obviously. One time, just thinking of an example off the top of my head, I had a friend who she was never really great at texting back, at making plans, at coordinating things. And so I started to build this resentment and bitterness towards her instead of asking her if something was wrong, or instead of asking her, what I would like to see her do instead, like what would really help me so that I don't feel rejected or just discouraged that she's not answering me. And it was just like this bitterness in my heart with that. This bitterness, resentment, unforgiveness, whatever it is, it's not going to just stay for this one person. It's going to translate into every area of your life. And so if you think that you can hold on to unforgiveness for a certain person and it won't affect your life, you're very mistaken. It's going to make you bitter. It's going to make you look at the world negatively and maybe even be tormented with the thoughts in your mind of holding this person, something that they did against you. And so when it comes to passive aggressiveness, instead of harboring these things inside, gain comfortability in having necessary difficult conversations and communicating your desires in a godly way. However, you want to still be open-handed when you are communicating what you would desire in a relationship or a friendship, because the other person might not receive it well in that moment. And I've seen this in my life. Maybe, my boyfriend and I had brought something up to each other that the other person doesn't receive well in the moment, but then maybe a few weeks later, a few days later, we both come to an agreement and we're like, okay, I see what you mean by this. I understand. There's no bad feelings. Now we can move on from this and we can put things in place so that we're making sure that we're both showing each other that we're both, being as Christ-like as we can towards each other and really just showing that love that we have for one another. And so obviously passive aggressiveness is easier to do than to actually have a conversation with someone. So I wanted to read a scripture. Leviticus 19:17 says, "Do not harbor hatred against your brother or sister. Rebuke your neighbor directly, and you will not incur guilt because of him." So the Bible instructs us to confront sin in a loving and humble way. So in Matthew 18:15, it says to take the wrongdoing of someone to them first. And if they don't respond well to that, then take another person with you, or multiple people that can help support what you're saying so that you can forgive and hopefully restore that relationship. Now, forgiveness isn't always a two-way street of this person repents and you forgive. Sometimes you have to forgive even if this person doesn't accept that what they did was wrong, but you might just need to set up some more boundaries. You might not need to be in a relationship with this person anymore, in a friendship, whatever it may be. I'm going to talk about forgiveness in another episode, but with all of this being said, I want you to remember that like it takes time to have a strong relationship with someone. It takes time to have a strong friendship with someone. And so by running away from conflict, by running away from anything that, may be uncomfortable, you are preventing growth in your own life, preventing growth in their life. And so that's just not good. We just don't want to do that. So this week, I would really suggest like praying over anything, and like asking the Lord to bring up anything in your life that may be a poor communication style, a poor communication habit. And then just taking note of that, how you respond to situations, how you react to when someone tells you something you could do better. Like, how do you respond to these things? And this is going to take time. Like I said, for me, it was not an overnight change, but it takes time. And the results are so rewarding. Now, my friendships were open. We can have this communication. My relationship with my boyfriend, we, have this ability to come to each other and hear what the other person is saying and then respond in a godly way. Not always make mistakes still, but it's realizing that and then asking yourself, okay, what can I do better next time so that I'm not defensive, so that this doesn't come up, you know? But with that being said, I really hope you did enjoy today's podcast episode. Like the podcast, subscribe, follow, and I hope that this week you can look at the ways you're communicating with people, look at any ungodly communication styles that you're having, and be able to talk about that openly with someone, maybe even just bring it to God, and pray over that. Because when we kill these communication habits before it kills our relationship, that's when we can really create a life that we love. So I hope you have a wonderful day. I will talk to you next time.